We are back with another deep dive into one of the most compelling business stories in American retail history. We're talking about Radio Shack, the little electronics store that was once on virtually every street corner in America, that helped introduce millions of people to the world of technology.
Radio Shack. Here it is. A Tandy 1000 SL computer system, IBM PC compatible, and sale price for under $9.99. Save $200.
And that ultimately couldn't find its place in the very world it helped create. So let's get into it. A store born from a revolution. Our story begins in Boston, Massachusetts, in 1921. Two brothers, Theodore and Milton Deutschman, opened a small store to serve a very specific and growing audience, amateur radio operators. At the time, radio technology was electrifying the world. It was new, exciting, and deeply technical. And there was a passionate community of hobbyists and enthusiasts who needed equipment, parts, and supplies to build and operate their own radio setups. The brothers named their store Radio Shack, a term borrowed from the small wooden enclosures on ships that housed radio equipment. The concept was niche, the customer base was enthusiastic, and for a while, the business did reasonably well. But radio technology, while exciting, was a specialized market with a ceiling. By the late 1950s and into the 1960s, the company had expanded modestly, but was struggling financially. It was carrying significant debt, and the future looked uncertain. That's when everything changed. In 1963, a Fort Worth, Texas-based retail company called Tandy Corporation purchased Radio Shack for approximately $300,000 and a pile of debt. At the time, it looked like a questionable deal. But Tandy's leadership, particularly a man named Charles Tandy, saw something in Radio Shack that others had missed. He saw a platform, a brand with name recognition in the electronics space that could be transformed into something much, much bigger. The Tandy era and the rise to greatness. Under Charles Tandy's leadership, Radio Shack underwent a dramatic reinvention. Tandy streamlined the business, slashed unprofitable product lines, and began an aggressive expansion strategy. He believed deeply in a vertical integration model, meaning Radio Shack would sell products largely manufactured or branded by Tandy itself under names like Realistic, Optimus, and Archer. This gave the company far greater control over pricing and profit margins than competitors who were selling other manufacturers' brands. The strategy worked brilliantly. Through the 1960s and 1970s, Radio Shack expanded at a remarkable pace, planting stores in strip malls and shopping centers across the country. But what really sent Radio Shack into the stratosphere was the dawn of the personal computer age. In 1977, Radio Shack launched the TRS-80, one of the first mass-produced, affordable personal computers ever sold to the general public. Alongside the Apple II and the Commodore PET, the TRS-80 was part of a trinity of machines that effectively launched the home computing revolution. And unlike Apple, which sold through limited channels, Radio Shack had thousands of retail locations already in place. Customers could walk into their local Radio Shack and walk out with a personal computer. That was extraordinary for 1977. The TRS-80 sold in the hundreds of thousands. It put Radio Shack at the absolute forefront of the personal computing revolution, and it cemented the brand's identity as the place where everyday Americans went to engage with technology. By the mid-1980s, Radio Shack was operating more than 7,000 stores and dealer outlets across the United States, roughly one location for every 35,000 Americans. The company was generating billions in annual revenue and employed tens of thousands of people. It was, without question, the most accessible electronics retailer in the country. You didn't need to drive to a big city to find cutting-edge technology. If you lived in small-town America, there was a very good chance there was a Radio Shack within driving distance. The stores themselves had a unique charm: compact, packed floor to ceiling with gadgets, batteries, cables, components, and curiosities. Walking into a Radio Shack felt like entering a treasure chest for tech enthusiasts. Whether you were a professional engineer, a curious teenager, or a grandparent looking for a cordless phone, Radio Shack had something for you. The cracks in the circuit. The 1990s began well enough for Radio Shack, but beneath the surface, serious structural problems were beginning to form. The retail electronics landscape was changing in ways that would ultimately prove fatal for the brand. The first major challenge was competition at scale. The rise of big-box retailers like Best Buy and Circuit City meant that consumers now had access to enormous stores with massive selections and, crucially, brand-name products: Sony TVs, JVC stereos, Panasonic cameras. Radio Shack, with its heavy reliance on its own private label brands, suddenly felt limited by comparison. Shoppers who wanted a Samsung or a Pioneer weren't walking into Radio Shack to find it. The second problem was the commoditization of electronics components. For decades, Radio Shack had thrived, in part because it was one of the few places you could find specific resistors, capacitors, cables, and electronic parts. But as the internet emerged and online retailers began to flourish, hobbyists and engineers could source those same components cheaper and with far more variety online. One of Radio Shack's most loyal customer segments, the technically minded DIY enthusiast, now had better options at their fingertips. The third, and perhaps most damaging challenge, was one of identity. As the 1990s rolled into the 2000s, Radio Shack repeatedly struggled to answer one basic question: what are we exactly? The company lurched from one strategic identity to another, trying to become a wireless phone retailer, then a satellite dish seller, then a digital camera store. Each pivot made some sense in isolation, but collectively they created a brand with no clear soul. Customers weren't sure what to expect when they walked in, and that confusion is deadly in retail. In a famous and somewhat cringeworthy moment of rebranding, the company actually attempted to rename itself simply The Shack in 2009, a move that was widely mocked and quietly abandoned. It was a sign of just how lost the brand had become. Bankruptcy, briefly back and gone again. By the early 2000s, Radio Shack was in serious financial distress. The company had been closing stores for years, but the underlying problems, too much competition, too little differentiation, and a business model that no longer matched the way people shopped for electronics, were simply too deep to fix with store closures alone. On February 5, 2015, Radio Shack filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy for the first time, announcing the closure of around 1,784 stores. Sprint, the wireless carrier, purchased roughly 1,435 of the remaining locations and attempted to operate them as co-branded Radio Shack/Sprint outlets. For a brief moment, it seemed like Radio Shack might survive in some reduced form, but it was not to be. The co-branded stores failed to gain traction, and in March 2017, Radio Shack filed for bankruptcy a second time, a rare and particularly painful distinction. General Wireless, the company operating the remaining stores, shut down nearly all remaining locations. At one point, there had been thousands of Radio Shack stores across America. Now there were just a few dozen scattered franchise locations remaining, a ghost of the brand that once defined accessible technology retail. From a vibrant chain of 7,000 locations to near total extinction in just a couple of decades. The numbers tell a brutal story. What makes the Radio Shack story so uniquely heartbreaking is that this was a company that was genuinely ahead of its time, a company that helped launch the home computing revolution, that brought technology to small-town America decades before the internet made that effortless and that served generations of curious minds and passionate hobbyists. But being early to the future is only an advantage if you keep moving. Radio Shack helped build the technology world, and then got left behind by it. An identity crisis, an inability to compete with big-box retailers, the relentless rise of online shopping, and a failure to stay relevant to any single customer group combined to bring down one of America's most storied retail brands. The store that sold America its first personal computers couldn't survive the age that computers created. And that, more than anything else, is the great irony at the heart of Radio Shack's story. From a tiny ham radio shop in Boston in 1921 to 7,000 stores, to bankruptcy twice. That is the story of Radio Shack. If you enjoyed this video, please smash that like button, subscribe so you don't miss our next episode, and leave a comment below. Did you ever have a Radio Shack moment? Maybe you bought your first computer there, or spent an afternoon digging through bins of components. I'd love to hear about it. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and we'll see you in the next one.